Hello, thanks for visiting Echoes of Crime. No, please don't bother her, please do. The girl's short scream echoed from the railing, then deathly silence tore through the peaceful atmosphere. That was Michelle Beets' last sound, a desperate cry for help. The audience should imagine, in the middle of a quiet street, the sound of car horns getting farther and farther away, and the figure of a man in a blue jacket running past, leaving behind a tragedy. It was the night of April 27, 2010, when she had just returned home from her shift at the hospital, and no one expected that the haunting had come so close. Chatswood Street, a suburb of Sydney, on April 27, 2010, was initially peaceful. Everything seemed to be going according to its usual order. Adults leaving work, children playing, whistling over afternoon tea. Michelle, 57, had just left the Royal North Shore Hospital where she had worked for 25 years as a nursing manager in the emergency department. She stopped for groceries, as she did every night, then drove back to the quiet house she shared with her boyfriend David. But fate was waiting outside the door. Around 6:30 p.m., darkness suddenly descended. The outdoor sensor lights and alarm system had been disabled when the power was cut at the junction box in front of the door. Michelle stepped out of the car, her apron still in her hand, and was about to call David when a knife cut through it. In an instant, the knife touched her neck, followed by a series of fatal stabs to the chest and head, the brutal act executed as quickly as a death lock. Michelle collapsed on the steps, her white shirt stained with red blood that dripped to the floor. No one came to her aid, but a couple walking their dog heard the screams. They rushed over and saw a figure in a blue jacket running away, carrying a heavy backpack. They tried to chase him, but he was gone. The serial number marked more than 20 blood stains along the railing and sidewalk, like needles searching for clues about the killer's escape route. The news spread like wildfire. The police sealed off the scene, examining every nook and cranny. They searched the house, discovering that the shed in the garden had been broken into. At first glance, it was not a robbery. Michelle was ambushed with a carefully calculated plan. Turn off the lights, break the lock, wait for her to come home, then attack. That afternoon, Dr. Robert Day called Michelle a valuable colleague, close friend, inspirational leader, and for patients, she was a solid support in the most critical cases. The police urgently searched for all clues. Dozens of witnesses were summoned, including staff at the hospital where she worked. A suspicion arose, could it be someone in the profession? Just days earlier, Michelle had told a colleague that she was haunted by a man she had worked with at the hospital. He was Walter Marsh, a former U.S. Marine who had worked at Royal North Shore on a 12-month contract that had expired and was not renewed. Marsh was rumored to have suspected Michelle of having stopped him from getting a visa. "She's the reason I can't stay in Australia," he had accused spitefully. He denied that she was just a visa interviewer, but that he was really angry after being rejected. The police described Marsh as having a clear motive. Marsh's identity was further obscured when he appeared as the victim a few days after the murder, as if by some sinister irony. He reported being sick, collapsed, and was taken to the same hospital where Michelle had worked. In that emergency room, he was confronted with the image of the murdered woman but was not haunted, and even participated in a press interview. "I love Michelle, I am not a murderer," he said, his face still calm. The police checked the abandoned backpack. It was full of suspicious signs, from nylon to blood stains. They searched the trash at many garbage collection points in the area but found no trace because the killer might have disposed of it. Marsh was questioned twice. The first time he denied it completely. "I don't know where she is, I didn't have a knife, I wasn't there." The second time he was still as insistent. But then his wife Samantha's revelation became a fatal blow. She recalled that just half an hour after the incident, her husband confessed, "I did it. It's done. The dog is gone." Not only that, he had practiced cutting throats using marine techniques on her and her brother as a practice run. The reality could not be more horrifying. a criminal using military documents to kill people. The police were fiercely involved. Marsh was called to the station for the third time. During a lengthy interrogation, he remained silent, but that silent homeland was filled with guilt, motive, and clues. Samantha left home, telling the police that he had asked the organization in Ireland for permission to kill Michelle. That sounded like a crazy story, but it made everyone wonder if everything had been planned. Breaking the silence of the investigation is evidence collected from Marsh's phone. Images of him throwing away his backpack with a knife. Statements from witnesses, his wife, his brother-in-law. The pieces are put together. He followed Michelle's schedule, called to set a trap, prepared the knife, moved the clothes then, waited in front of the railing when she just got out of the car. A meticulously staged murder hidden under a normal coat. But the night still doesn't reveal everything. Marsh is interrogated by his wife's tears, the cold gaze of the victim's husband, and the flashing lights in the interrogation room. The question is, can a man who once followed military discipline kill someone so calmly? The plan is perfectly staged, but is it broken by a mistake? And inside him, is there a variant of hatred or something more criminal, a wrong ideology? There are more chilling details behind the case. If you find it worth listening to, don't forget to subscribe to see the next part. Walter Marsh was once an organized man. As a former U.S. Marine, he understood discipline, tactics, and deadly silence in the dark. But the scariest thing was not his military past, but how he brought that skill to a new target. An innocent woman, a former coworker, and all because of a negative job review. Michelle Beets had no idea that she was being followed. Marsh had been quietly returning to the area around her house several times, wearing camouflage clothing, calling the landline to find out when she was there. He used a public phone to avoid detection. She had told her best friend that a strange man kept appearing near her house, making her feel inexplicably scared. But Michelle was a strong, tough person. She had handled many emergencies, had faced death victims, so a little worry did not make her too uneasy. But perhaps deep down she had begun to know something was wrong. The proof was that on that fateful evening, Michelle changed her habit. Instead of driving into the driveway as usual, she backed the car in so that the car door faced the driveway. Maybe she had a premonition, or it was simply a sudden decision. But it was this small change that made her get out of the car and face the killer directly. Walter Marsh was waiting. The knife was sharpened. The jacket and backpack had been replaced with clothes from a second-hand store to dispose of. And as Michelle stepped onto the steps, he pounced. Michelle tried to fight back, but she had no chance. Marsh's wife even said, "If she stops screaming, I'll let her go." But that was a lie, because that was followed by a fatal stab. At a later trial, Marsh was found to have told his wife, "Finally, I'm allowed. The Irish establishment has given me permission." This statement immediately raised concerns. Was he paranoid, or was this an excuse for a personal revenge plan? In the military, silent killing techniques were no longer a secret, and he had rehearsed those moves on his own family. But Michelle was not the only target. Prosecutors revealed that before killing her, Marsh had planned to fly to the United States to kill his ex-wife. The reason? A $50,000 child support debt. So Michelle's death was not simply a murder out of anger, but rather part of an extremist mindset, where anyone who interfered with him could become a target. Court records show that Marsh not only followed Michelle, but also drew up a detailed map of the area around her home. He analyzed her living habits, work hours, and blind spots in the security system. He knew when she came home, when the lights turned on, and most of all, when she was most vulnerable. One of the strongest pieces of evidence was CCTV footage of a man throwing a backpack into a trash bin at the Chatswood Shopping Center just minutes after Michelle was killed. Although his face was unclear, his gait, gestures, and timing were completely consistent with Marsh's travel schedule. He also changed his clothes in a public restroom, hiding all traces. The police searched through tons of trash to find his backpack but failed. However, the testimony of Marsh's wife and brother-in-law was enough to turn the situation around. Samantha, who was so afraid of her husband that she did not dare to say a word, decided to confess everything. "He told me that night, 'It's over, she can't hurt me anymore.'" Her brother also confirmed that Marsh's practice of cutting his throat in the apartment was not a joke, but a cruel preparation. When the case came to light, the public was shocked. The big question arose. How could a man who had been a soldier, who had lived in a disciplined environment, kill someone so calculatedly? Did the military turn him into a murderer, or was it his life of failure that pushed him down the cliff? If you want to continue following this case, especially the shocking testimony at the trial, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next part. When the police arrested Walter Marsh, the atmosphere in the apartment where he shared with his wife and 2 children was frozen. There was no screaming, no struggling. Just a middle-aged man in a gray sweater and khakis standing there unsurprised, unconvinced, just silent. But behind that calm was a raging storm, a storm brewing for months with calculation, anger, and chilling determination. Marsh did not talk right away. He remained silent during hours of questioning, asking only to call his lawyer. But his wife Samantha could not keep quiet any longer. She was terrified, not only because her husband was a killer, but also because she and her children were living with a man capable of such brutality. "I thought I knew him," she said in her deposition, "but when he said, 'I'm done with her,' I knew I didn't recognize him anymore." At this point, the investigation moved into a new phase. Not who killed Michelle, but how to prove in court that Walter Marsh was behind it all. Although the testimony of his wife and brother-in-law carried weight, the law still needed clear evidence. And that was when the CCTV footage, phone location data, and computer search history began to reveal everything. Marsh had searched Michelle's home address many times. In the browser history, there were phrases like "how to kill without leaving a trace," "how to destroy evidence," and even "will you get arrested if there are no witnesses?" These questions, put in the context of a calculated death, no longer sounded like mere curiosity. They were silent confessions. When the CCTV footage was analyzed more closely, the police discovered that Marsh's characteristic limp was seen on the tape near the crime scene. Although his face was not facing the camera, the time, body shape, and height all matched in every detail. In particular, the hood and heavy coat were identical to the outfit Marsh wore in a photo taken by his wife a few days earlier. The trial took place in April 2011. The Australian media followed closely, because this was not just a murder case but a story about a person who had saved many lives, whose life was taken away right where she should have felt safest. The hallway leading to Michelle's house was recreated in court. Witnesses, from friends and colleagues to military psychologists, were all present. Walter Marsh sat in the courtroom at that time, his eyes cold and expressionless. Not a word of apology, not a single tear. When the prosecutor asked him if he regretted it, he just curled his lips. "If it wasn't me, someone else would have done it. She's the type of person who drives people crazy." That sentence made the whole courtroom silent. At this time, public opinion began to divide. Some people thought that Marsh might have mental illness, post-traumatic stress after the war. The military, of course, left him with lasting emotional wounds. But there is also a line of thought that one cannot use pathology as an excuse for cold-blooded cruelty. If so, could anyone use the past to kill someone? Marsh's defense attorney emphasized this point. "My client no longer has control over his emotions. He has PTSD. He has seen death, blood, and things that ordinary people cannot bear. And then, when he is rejected for work, when he is insulted, all those emotions explode like a bomb." But the prosecutor strongly rebutted. There are many veterans who live in silence, struggling with mental trauma without causing harm to anyone. Walter Marsh is different. He planned, he watched, he practiced, and he acted with the precision of a drill. This is not an impulse. This is coldness. Another shocking detail. After killing Michelle, Marsh went home as if nothing had happened. He ate dinner, played with his children, and went to work the next morning as usual. In the eyes of his neighbors, he was still a polite, quiet, but kind man. But no one knew that just a few hours earlier, he had murdered an innocent woman. The trial lasted for days. Witnesses took the stand, recounting their pain, fear, and sense of irreparable loss. Michelle's parents, their eyes red, said, "We could not imagine that our daughter would go like this. She spent her life saving people, and then she would die at the hands of someone she tried to help." And then the moment of judgment came. The judge stood up, looked straight at the defendant. The air in the courtroom was so quiet that you could hear a gasp. And the sentence was read: life in prison without parole. Walter Marsh would never see the light of day. There would be no more chance of harming anyone again. It seemed like justice had been served. But would the sentence be enough to fill the void in the hearts of Michelle's loved ones? Was Marsh's account of an Irish organization that authorized murder delusional, or a hint of something deeper? When the courtroom doors closed and Walter Marsh was led away in heavy silence, many thought it was the end. But for Michelle Beets' family, it was just the beginning of a life without their beloved daughter. Michelle's parents did not return to the United States immediately after the trial. They stayed in Sydney for several weeks, walking the streets their daughter had walked, standing silently in front of the house where she had lived and where she had taken her last breath. I kept looking at that door, thinking that maybe Michelle would open it and say, "Mom, don't worry," her mother recalled in a tearful interview. That was the most heartbreaking thing. Michelle did not die in a strange place, not in an accident, but right in front of the house that should have been her last safe place. She had no chance to protest, no time to call out to anyone, no one to come to her side to say a final word. And the killer was not a stranger, but someone who had taken the elevator with her, who had waited for her in the office, who had said, "I would love to work with you." That betrayal made everything more haunting than ever. A year after the trial, a documentary called The Final Step was released. The Final Step recounted the case through the stories of relatives, colleagues, and investigators. Among them, there was a detail that many people could not forget. The police found a dark leather notebook in Walter Marsh's house. In it, he had drawn a diagram of Michelle's house, listing the times she usually came home, the light around the door, and even escape plans. This was not a sudden outburst of anger. This was a plan. The plan was made step by step, as if he were on a special mission. And that is what makes people shudder when the killing is no longer emotional but rational. The mind of a man trained to fight had been twisted into a killing machine. But what had led Walter Marsh to this point? Military psychologists began to investigate. Reports indicated that Marsh had clear signs of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, from his service. He had seen his comrades die, been in a war zone full of constant stress, and when he returned, no one really listened to him. He was denied jobs, judged unfit, and excluded from an environment where he felt he still belonged. Michelle, in his eyes, was more than just a woman who had rejected his application. She was a symbol of exclusion, and to a mind that was already cracking, that became a trigger. The question was the system doing enough to protect people like Michelle and to treat people like Walter? Following the incident, the Royal North Shore Hospital where Michelle worked set up a memorial program called the Beets Foundation, which supports the safety of healthcare workers and raises funds for victims of occupational violence. In the first 5 years, more than 300 people received both legal and psychotherapy help. A former colleague said, "Michelle not only saved people while she was alive, but she continued to do so after she was gone." As for Walter Marsh, he is serving his sentence at Lithgow Maximum Security Prison in New South Wales. His name is no longer mentioned in the press as much as it once was. But occasionally, soldiers who served with Marsh write to the prison, expressing regret not because they defended him, but because they believed in him. One of them said, "Walter was a brother I could rely on in the midst of bombs and bullets. Now I don't know what to call him." And finally, there is a medical community still learning to recover from the shock. A family still keeps a picture of their daughter on the altar, hoping to celebrate her birthday every year even though she is no longer there. And a society is still asking, how do we distinguish between a person in need and a person who is slowly becoming a danger? Can we prevent similar tragedies? Was Michelle Beets' death a fateful accident or a warning bell about the invisibility of psychological violence that is sometimes more silent than a dagger, but just as sharp? Michelle Beets is gone, but her story lives on as a reminder that sometimes danger does not come from strangers, but from people we once thought were colleagues, friends, neighbors, acquaintances. And when we walk into our homes each night, closing the door behind us, we still have the right to believe that we are safe. But at the same time, we need to ask, are we really safe? Michelle Beets devoted her life to saving lives. Little did she know that the price she paid for her devotion would be her life. A strong, intelligent, determined woman had her life taken away right in front of her house by someone who would not accept rejection. Her case is not only a heartbreaking story, but also a warning to all of us that violence does not discriminate by profession, status, or kindness. And that sometimes the place that seems the safest is the place that is potentially dangerous. If you are watching this video, please take a moment to reflect. Is there someone around us who is drowning in hatred that we do not realize? Do we really know how to protect those who are dedicated to the community? And most importantly, is our silence contributing to the next tragedy? Thank you for watching until the end of the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next true crime cases where we not only listen, but also learn to look deep into the dark. See you in the next video.